fourth-year PhD candidate in art history here at UT Austin, and I'm here to tell you a little bit more about the Center Space project. I'm the Curatorial Fellow at the Visual Arts Center, and so I wanted to give you some curatorial advice about submitting a really good proposal for an exhibition at the Center Space, which is the gallery right behind us right now. So I've brought Riel Sturchio to accompany me in this video and this journey. Riel, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Riel. I'm a second-year MFA candidate in studio arts. And I'm here today because I recently had a show through Center Space called Body as a Bridge.
So we're just going to kind of start from the beginning and talk about how you come up with an exhibition idea and things you might want to think about as you plan your proposal. So Riel, how did you come up with the idea for Body as a Bridge?
Well, Body as a Bridge manifested from a personal project that I had been working on for several years that was happening outside of UT. And when I came here, I got to know some of the work that was happening in the building, specifically with the photo manager of Hamburg. I got to see her work. I was looking at it online actually, and I realized that there was a parallel between the topics that she was focusing on and even her technique with the same topics and techniques that I was working with. And I thought it'd be an amazing opportunity to put those two together, to talk about themes of the body, women, gender, and different kinds of elements of sickness and health, topics that generally don't get discussed in the art world. For me, my participation in Body as a Bridge manifested as curating the show, but also integrating some of my personal ideas within my part of the project. So putting together a show is, for me, a form of activism, specifically when it engages communities, topics, and kinds of identities that aren't traditionally seen in the art world. So for me, with the project, we were dealing with two female-identified artists and photographers, which is not traditionally seen in the art world. And then the topics that we were talking about included age, disability, the body, and stigma. For me, a part of the project was putting together a zine with my sister that included literature about her experiences as a disabled person. And putting that in an art context is a form of activism and engagement. And that's the kind of art that I want to see in the world. Art that's bringing together communities through awareness and also destigmatizing topics that generally don't make it into the art context.
Yeah.